JJ Tiziou is our curator for the exhibition. You can give a wave. There he is. Yeah. And also led by Kristina Murray, our new director of environmental art. Hey, Kristina. So thank you all for being here. This week's Thursday Night Live Walking the Edge community exhibition discussion. So I'm going to do a brief intro before we all get started, and then I'm going to hand it off to Kristina and JJ. So first and foremost, this event will be recorded and uploaded to the center's YouTube channel. So we ask that you keep your microphone on mute while listening. So please turn off your video if you don't want it to be visible, but if you do, please go ahead. Since we're going to be screen sharing during some of the presentation, use the side-by-side view to view both the speaker and the slides. So during the talk, there are going to be lots of questions. We really encourage those, so please put them down in the chat, and then at the end, we're going to try and get to all of them. So before we get started, we want to acknowledge that the lands of the Schuylkill Center are located on the ancestral lands of the Lenape people. So their presence and resilience continues to this day in the tri-state area of New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, as well as in the forced diaspora throughout Turtle Island. We take this opportunity to honor the original caretakers of this land and recognize the histories of land theft, erasure, and oppression that has brought us here today. The Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education acknowledges the Lenape people's environmental stewardship since time immemorial as critical. So in this beautiful land that we have here, it consists of 365 acres, 4 miles of which are trails. And as spring is coming, we highly encourage you guys to come visit us. We have some beautiful trails to come hike and walk. First and foremost, the Schuylkill Center does a lot of things, but our main objective and goal is to spread environmental education and connect people to nature. And we do this through a number of ways. One of which is nature preschool. We start out young and we have a wonderful nature preschool at our center. It's truly such a unique experience that we're able to give kids in the area. If you're interested in sending your kids here, it's really a lovely space. They're out in nature every day, exploring and learning. Another thing we have is Camp Schuylkill coming up this summer. We have an amazing new manager of our camp, and the kids are going out every day in the summer doing fun things to keep them excited and occupied out in nature. So if you're interested, we have more information on our website, and there are a couple of spots available. And of course, what today's topic is going to be about is our wonderful art exhibition, Walking the Edge, and it's going to be here at the center. Sorry about that. Walking the Edge, yes, through April 1st. So please, as amazing as today's Zoom is going to be, come and see it in person. It's really, truly a sight to see. And if you want to get involved more, we constantly have volunteer opportunities available at the center. Those are also all in our website. You can find more information. We have things all throughout the year. Another way you can get involved is to become a member. Please join. Our members receive discounts on programs and in the gift shop, advance notice on exclusive programs, and you're able to just join online. And I know a lot of you are already members, and if you are, thank you. We appreciate you and your presence at the center. I'd like to take a moment to also encourage you to scan the barcode here. I'm going to leave it up. So there's a lot of changes the center is going through, and we're updating our master plan. And we want you to be a part of it. Your voice is really important. The community's voice is very important. So you can just submit that here on the barcode, and you might win a native plant. That has to do with our native plant sale that's also coming up. Also, another exciting thing that's happening at the center, our executive director, Mike Wildbacker, has published his book, Wild Philly. And if you're interested, it's being sold at our bookshop. It's autographed. It's a beautiful book. And if you really are interested, it's, again, located in our bookstore, and it's really a wonderful read. So go check it out. And last but not least, if you enjoyed today's speakers and lecture, then we have another one next week, Uncovering Bioluminescent Fungi, and it's led by our educator, Matt Schink, who's an amateur mycologist. He's very passionate about what he does, and if you're interested in fungi, it's a good time. So I know you all want to get started, so I'm going to pass it off to Kristina and JJ. This stage is yours, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zaina. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's so great to have you all here and to be able to celebrate this exhibition and community in this virtual space. I wanted to just start off with a little bit of an introduction to the work that we do in the Environmental Art Department at the Center, as well as some information about this exhibition. Again, as Zaina said, if you haven't yet had a chance to check it out, please come and stop by. We're very excited to share it with you. So I'm just going to take a moment here to share my screen, and then I'll get started a little bit more.
Kristina, you got muted.
You're muted. Hey, Kristina, I think you're still muted. Give us one moment for technical difficulties, everyone.
There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. I forgot, I've already run into this issue when you sometimes screen share it, it automatically mutes you. All right. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about Walking the Edge, our wonderful exhibition that's on view through April 1st. And JJ is the curator of this exhibition. So this is our 4th biannual community show. So what that means is every 2 years, we open up a call for submissions from our community to share artwork. And so for this show, we gave everyone this very loose idea of thinking about art that is related to walking, to perimeters, to borders, to boundaries that we experience in nature and in our everyday lives. So we received over 200 submissions from over 100 artists. We were very, very fortunate to have so much wonderful community input on this show. And so JJ ran with that and created a wonderful exhibition that you're going to hear a little bit more about. Okay, so the idea behind this show is really to think about embracing walking as an artistic practice. And to think about kind of reflecting on our own interconnectedness with nature. This show and the programs that we're having around it all provide opportunities to gain embodied understandings of the complex ways that we interact with our environment. And we really wanted to give people the space to explore our own personal relationships with these concepts of borders, boundaries, perimeters, and kind of what that all means to us. So without further ado, I wanted to give just like a little bit of an introduction into JJ and the work that he does, because there's quite a bit that JJ does, not only in the art space, but in the community as well. So JJ is an artist, JJ is a massage therapist, a block captain, kind of a jack of all trades. He is best known for his 85,000 square foot mural that hangs at the Philadelphia airport called How Philly Moves, which is the largest piece of public art in the city. And he is also the organizer of Walk Around Philadelphia, which is something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but he takes the time to walk the complete perimeter of Philadelphia and has now, correct me if I'm wrong, JJ, has now done this over 11 times. So I wanted to get into a little bit of a conversation with JJ to ask him some questions about this exhibition. So JJ, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting the show. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to get this kicked off with learning a little bit more about how you got involved in this exhibition and what your curatorial vision was for it as you started to put it together.
Sure. I have been familiar with the Schuylkill Center for a long time, although it's far from home for me, so I don't get there that often. But another land lab resident artist years ago invited me into their project there, and I knew the Schuylkill Center was there. And then as I've started walking the perimeter of the city, first once and then over and over again, I walk by the Schuylkill Center, twice a year now as part of this pilgrimage. And so as this has been evolving from first a one-time artist residency to a personal annual tradition to a twice a year like public program with several hundred people now participating in it, I've been interested in connecting with cultural institutions, with people who live and work on the perimeter of the city, the Schuylkill Center obviously being a prime example of an interesting spot and potential partner for this project on the perimeter. And so I was thrilled when your predecessor, Tina, invited me to curate this show in partnership with The Walk. Secret thing, I actually applied for the Land Lab residency and didn't get it. And then she said, but we'd love to have you curate the show. And I was like, great, perfect. And so I came into with this loose idea of doing a community exhibition in partnership with The Walk. But also we didn't want to just make it only about the walk around the perimeter of the city. And so we worked on that call to keep it related so it wasn't totally all over the place, but something that would connect to this walk we've been doing, exploring borders and boundaries, exploring the edges of the city, and also taking it into more metaphorical realms and seeing what people might submit. And as you said, there was a ton of amazing submissions. I was kind of floored by the number and the quality and the variety of submissions that came in. And it was delightful and overwhelming and a real sort of logistical, creative challenge to figure out how to, I feel like being a curator is a little bit like being a cartographer, a surveyor who's drawing a border, right? You're deciding what's in and what's out, what is this thing and what is the shape of this thing. And so, I did my best to look at all the pieces and figure out how to make them come together. And I'm really delighted with how it came together. So I'm really grateful to all the artists who submitted. I hope you'll be able to take a look at not just their work in the gallery, but also their work on the website, because some of them have some extra comments or links to websites or other things that'll give you more information on their work. And I'll stop rambling now. Maybe that starts the answer.
Thanks for that, JJ. And as you can see, we've got a lot of different images to share with you since we're not actually in the gallery space tonight. The last images that were up on the screen were in progress photos as we were installing the gallery space. The couple that are up now are from our opening, which happened at the end of January. So to kind of build on a lot of what we're just saying, JJ, we talked about how we were overwhelmed in the most wonderful way by the huge, wonderful reception we had from all of the artists that submitted work for this show. But how did you then go about thinking about incorporating all of these different artworks, these different artistic expressions, these different mediums, different voices? There's a lot to see and a lot to experience for the senses in the show. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you approached just the plethora of wonderful, content we had to work with for this show.
Yeah, I personally am a person who has made a life around sometimes being bad with boundaries. In my life as a photographer, my earlier career, I made it my job to fall in love with every single person at the wedding or the protest or whatnot. And for that moment, just get closer to them than might be normally appropriate, right? And I'm always the person who wants to include everyone. I opened my living room to the whole neighborhood. My undergraduate thesis, they gave us this much wall space and I didn't want to put up 2 photos. So I built a light box with 288 slides, because I wanted to have as many images as possible included. And so when there were so many submissions, it's oh, I don't know how we can represent all of this, but I kind of want to represent all of this. Because, when we walk the city, when I set out to follow the perimeter of Philadelphia, I thought I knew Philadelphia. And then I walked around it and realized it is so much more vast. And I knew a couple facets of it. And it's so much more complex. And there's so many different types of experiences around the city's edge. And this show is kind of like that. It's like, oh, there's this type of response and this type of response. And there's a bunch of photographs, but there's also a quilt, and there's also some sculptures, and there's some written things being sent to us from Michigan. And there are these amazing walking sticks. And someone has hand traced the entire old transit map of Philadelphia on silk in a giant piece. There's things that are more literally from the border of the city, photographs of sites that I have walked by. And then there are abstract bits of art that represent borders, or the things that allude to our human internal, external boundaries, so much. So yeah, I basically spent a lot of time first reorganizing the submission spreadsheet, looking at all the work, trying to categorize it, trying to figure out what was in what media and what size and how it might possibly work together. And it's one of those things where you just spend a lot of time stewing on all of it, and then you start to make some choices. And then the pieces start to fall into place. And based on what the first choices you've made, that sort of dictates how the next things can fit together and unfold. And I had a couple ideas. I spent a couple visits at the Schuylkill Center, sort of in the space. I built up a very detailed, like, scale model Photoshop layout of all the walls in the space and all the sizes of the pieces. Some of them were fixed sizes. Some of them were digital prints we were making, so we could make them different sizes. And I started doing a lot of just playing around with all the pieces, and eventually something came together. It could have taken all sorts of different shapes. There were some of the artists who submitted work, and I was like, wait, we could do a whole show of just your work, and it would be on theme. Or I could do a whole gallery with just these couple people's painting. And then trying to figure out how to tie it all together in this theme and make this cohesive work and include as much as possible. It's imperfect, but I'm also really delighted with how it came together.
Yes, yeah. So thank you for that. And I absolutely agree. We've had so many wonderful compliments from people who just stopped by. The show has been so well received, and it's been a great joy to just get a call from our receptionist and be like, there's someone here to see the show that wants to come and chat with you about it. So I get called up a couple times a week to talk with artists and visitors about the space. And it's been such a beautiful show for building community, which I've really appreciated. So something else that I really connected with and picked up on as I was talking to artists as they were dropping off work before we installed the show, kind of a big connector, a big theme that I saw as I was talking to people about their pieces and how they got, how they became familiar with the show, how they became interested in it, was seeing this really, really important theme of people wanting to represent their experience of walking in nature or spending time in nature during a global pandemic. I heard from a lot of people that, their experience getting outside, especially in early COVID times, was, it brought a lot of solace to them, or it was a retreat, or it was a way to cope with just like this overwhelming, sense of dread that so many of us had about what's the future going to be like. So I was really curious to hear from you if you can either speak to how this is represented in the show, our connection with nature during the pandemic, or if there are any other kind of like surprise themes or connections that you picked up on after the exhibition was installed.
Sure, that's broad and a lot of things. And yes, what a gift walking has been during the pandemic, when all of a sudden the indoor spaces that we gathered in became unsafe, right? And also the pandemic reminded us of our vulnerability, of our interdependence, and it maybe reminded us of some of our basic human needs that we might take for granted. Walking outside is a very basic human thing, but we sort of lose it in our world sometimes, in our world of screens, like here we are, in our world of offices and in our closed up buildings. And it's been well documented before the pandemic, how therapeutic walking is as a physical activity, as a way to process, as a way to think, as a way to facilitate conversation, to be out in nature, to be in trees, to have vast horizons. All of these things are therapeutic in general. And then with the added stresses of the pandemic, walking became a refuge. I, here in West Philly, was so grateful for the wider streets than Center City to be able to walk, have walking dates in the early pandemic with neighbors where we would be, one person on the sidewalk and I'd be in the street by the parked cars. We'd be like 10 feet apart, but we can walk together and have a conversation. And I found that, when the first perimeter walk, was a one-off in 2016, and transformed my life. Like, it was one of the most joyous weeks of my life and has shifted before the pandemic even. So many of my social activities have become walking ones. Instead of let's grab a coffee or let's grab a beer, I'd be like, let's get something to go and walk, or let's walk across town and then sit down at that restaurant. And I've found that, it's just become a more significant part of my life and a way that I've really enjoyed relating to others and to the city around and to nature. And there's something about walking in different seasons. There's something about, going on. I think what I'll say is, there's been also a lot written about how people have rediscovered walking in the pandemic as it became one of the options that we could do. I think there are some silver lining gifts of the pandemic, things lessons from it that we may carry forward. One of them for me is walking. The first sort of larger public iteration of Walk Around Philadelphia came during the first pandemic Fringe Festival, when the folks at Fringe Arts decided they wanted to have a festival still in September of the first year of the pandemic, but it was going to be mostly virtual with some safe outdoor distanced activities. I was like, oh, well, here's a thing I can offer, and I facilitated a walk that was sign up online, organize your own pod, pick up some supplies from my porch, download some maps online, go do your own walking, come back together on Zoom, and we'll debrief and compare notes and share experiences. And that was really rich. But as the pandemic has started to shift, maybe recede, and being back in physical space has become more accessible, it's been great to also bring groups of people together through the walk. Because for me, I think another thing that came out of the pandemic was realizing still we know that we're interconnected, and yet we have all these separations, right? We have the people who can work from home and people who are essential workers and have to be out in the field, or and all of the different worlds contained within our world. And what I love about what happens with the perimeter walk is when we bring people together from different facets of life or different parts of the city, who might not otherwise have crossed paths, they fall in side by side with their curiosity and love for the city and immediately connect and immediately look out for each other. And I would love to see more of that in our world as we keep on figuring out how to walk together through terrain that keeps on changing under our feet, right?
Yes, absolutely. And just to give you a little context of the image up here, this is the walking group, the Walk Around Philadelphia group that we sent off from the center on the morning of Saturday, February 25th. And the group was so big, we decided to call them a parade rather than a group of walkers. So you can see them all gathered in front of the Schuylkill Center in our space here. My last question for you, JJ, is what are your plans for continuing this work into the future? And this work meaning the integration of art and Walk Around Philadelphia.
Walk Around Philadelphia came out of an artist retreat. And from the very first walk, there was an article in the Inquirer, and the journalist is asking us, is this art, this thing of 4 of you walking around the perimeter of the city? And since that first walk, our original perimeter walker pals, I know that Anne is here in the room somewhere, we started realizing that there was this whole community of walking artists, and folks who devote their practices to walking projects. And so, is this art as it continues for me? That's not necessarily the relevant question, but how the walk integrates with art is interesting, with other forms of art. a couple different things have come out of, my background is in photography. I have put those skills mostly to bed as I've retired and become a massage therapist, but I still take a lot of snapshots with my cell phone of people doing the walk, sort of documenting it as it unfolds, and I put together photo blogs recapping the perimeter adventures and so on and so forth. But last year I picked up 2 extra through a little microgrant residency with the Independent Seaport Museum, another cultural institution on the perimeter, and the Penn program in environmental humanities. I had a little opportunity to cultivate 2 different media, which were printmaking, and there's a map print that looks vaguely like this, minus the dots, but it's the watershed with the perimeter overlaid on it, and it's really like the medium of printmaking made perfect sense to me for this, to take this image of the landscape, the water, which doesn't care about borders and boundaries, it just flows downhill, and to then be able to come and put in the second layer of the print of drawing the red line around the border of what is and what is not Philadelphia. If you're interested in printmaking, at our closing event, we will have an opportunity to make your own prints of that print. So that's April 1st. Come to the Schuylkill Center and join us for that. Bring your friends, tell them all about it. The other thing that came out of that little opportunity was a little bit of carpentry project where we installed our first perimeter signpost, which is on Penn's Landing. That might be in your slides somewhere, but it is a large sign, sort of like a national parks trail sign, that's installed on the side of like it's on the waterfront, right by the ice cream truck outside of Independent Seaport Museum, which is the most heavily pedestrian trafficked part of the perimeter, most likely, where everyone's out walking. They just don't think of it as walking the perimeter of Philadelphia. They're just walking on Penn's Landing. But what I love about this sign is that it points the way 100 miles in either direction to places like the Schuylkill Center, and it points the way to other environmental education centers, to parks and green spaces, to rivers and tributaries, and then also to water treatment plants. And then it also points the way to industrial sites and Superfund toxic waste sites that are never advertised on signposts inviting people to walk to them. So that's an interesting perspective and learning invite. And I'm super thrilled that I just got a confirmation that we are invited to install one more of those over at Glenford on the Delaware, which is another marvelous cultural institution on the border of the city where Kristina used to work. I'm hoping I can talk the Schuylkill Center into maybe hosting one as well. We'll see. Now my scheme is we have already these stickers lining the city, sort of blazing the trail, but to have these physical signposts around. The other medium that I've sort of dabbled with, and I'm just talking about my own creative practice, we're going to get into the walk and the other art. There's a video loop in the installation that I got to play video editor. That's not a thing I normally do because it takes entirely too much time. And I did spend a couple all-nighters piecing together some of my footage, some of several other people's footages that was submitted of experiences of the walk. And it's kind of a mesmerizing, captivating thing. And so it's been sweet to have the opportunity to dip my toes in a new medium through this context of setting up the exhibition as well. But what I'm excited about, there will be some more exhibits relating to the walk at Studio 34 in West Philly coming up probably in May. We don't have the set dates. And then hopefully at Cherry Street Pier. So some of this work will continue, have the opportunity to be exhibited publicly longer, both at Studio 34 and at Cherry Street Pier into the summer. Which I'm very excited about. So sorting out all the details and timing on that, but I'm excited for that to come through and to continue to see what is sourced. The walk and this exhibition, they're having ripples. One of the people, maybe this is the segue where I start asking some of the other walkers to tell us their stories, because I already know that I've known that the walk has inspired other things, but the exhibition now has inspired some other things. There's a lot of people here who have some work in the show. There's also someone here whose walk was inspired by the show. So Joe, I think I saw you come on the call. Do you want to tell us a story about your walk that came out of this walk?
Are you talking to me,
Jay? I am talking to you.
Hey, JJ. All right. I just turned on my video. I'm Joe Hohenstein. And I joined JJ for 2 days on the Delaware River, which intersect with my political district. I'm actually the state rep for the river wards in Frankfurt and Wissinoming and Tacony. And and so the 2 days before I met up with JJ, I walked from my house out and around through Frankfurt and Aramingo Avenue, and then down through Kensington and Fishtown, and then did the walk along the river, and then did one day after where we walked up from Tacony. I'm going to be putting together my things. I've got something drafted up, but I have to finalize it all before it goes up on my legislative webpage. And I'll share that all. I think, JJ, I did share all of our photos and videos, right? Did you get those or no?
I think I got a
If you
couple.
haven't.
Okay.
If you haven't, yeah, I'll make sure you get them all. But just so that people know, I mean, to me, it was really crystallized, and I just kind of blurted it out when you were recording me that one time, that walking around the perimeter or walking around the edge of something lets you know more about what's in the middle of it. And that's exactly what I felt like. I felt that experience that you talked about of knowing the whole space more when you walk around the edge, because you find all of these things that you didn't know existed. It was exactly that way. And the my favorite part and the thing that really sort of struck me about the idea of that walking around the edge is, I couldn't tell you who wrote it, but it was a physical poem that was written out and around, that was following an ant's path all through, I guess, what ended up being about 6 or 7 feet of postcard board, and I for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the artist, but I just remember reading that entire segment and recognizing that there's a creativity that gets triggered when you decide to do something that takes you out of your comfort zone. And that was right in the exhibit. It's right along the right-hand wall as you go into the back part of it. But that's what it felt like to me. And I started out trying to do it as sort of a quasi-political thing, but it really isn't that. It was really about, and the very last day, we had to do one of those things that you mentioned, JJ, where we were cutting straight through a cemetery, because somehow that was the dividing line. But when we were doing that walk, I was walking with 2 older women, and we walked a fair distance, longer than I thought they were going to. And at the end of it, one woman was almost apologetic, and she said, I just felt really safe when I was doing this. I know I'm not supposed to say that around anymore, because people say everything's dangerous and everything. But she said, I just felt safe when I was walking. And that just sort of just stuck with me, the idea that you get surprised in good ways by what you find. So yes, I definitely was inspired, and I'm going to keep on doing it. I'll probably catch you guys in some way, shape, or form in September. But yeah, this will be something that we keep doing. And I'll make sure you get all the stuff that you need from me, JJ, as far as what we had.
I appreciate a political representative who walks the walk. Thank you for really doing that. I'm hoping to find more ways to plug some of our elected representatives into walking their parts of the border that connect with this. There's that sign I was telling you about earlier down on Penn's Landing. One of the other folks that I saw that has work represented in the show and has done some of the walk is Yelena. And I'm wondering, Yelena, if I could put you on the spot and ask you, who has come to this project via Circuitous Paths and has one of my favorite pieces in the show. I have so many favorite pieces in the show, let's not. But Yelena, would you like to jump in and share a little bit about your experience? I didn't warn you that I was going to put you on the spot.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks for this opportunity. And earlier I had my video on and didn't realize that I was finishing up cleaning up after dinner and was mortified to realize my video was on. But anyway, thanks for this opportunity, JJ, and congratulations to you on this exhibit and this discussion tonight. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure other folks appreciate it too who haven't made it out to the Schuylkill Center yet. But yes, having gotten to participate in the walk around Philadelphia, the segment from the Walmart at the piers at the waterfront to the Philadelphia airport, as well as the experience that you described at the seaport with the printmaking. I got to do the printmaking with my kid, and I found it to be really engaging and exciting to be able to have an opportunity to talk about borders while doing something new with our hands, and having something to hold in our hands and take home and have on the wall, and now to always be able to, while we're talking about the city, have a handy map on hand to point to. But I would say the thing that was most striking to me about the walk around Philadelphia experience that we did was passing on foot an area that I have passed in a car more times than I could count, and realizing how challenging it is to navigate on foot, and how many more challenges it presents to someone if they need to get around on foot. For example, if you think about the bridge that takes you from across the Schuylkill right by the airport, if you happen to choose the wrong side of the bridge to walk on, both sides have a pedestrian walk. But if you happen to choose the left side, if you're walking towards the airport, you're fine. You'll get to the end and navigate your way towards the hotels back there. But if you take, yes, the northbound direction and go up the sidewalk, once you've spent this whole time crossing that bridge, past the noisy traffic and without looking down because it's really high and scary, you find yourself at this dead end where the sign to several miles of traffic going like 60 to 70 miles an hour. Something I would have never noticed if I hadn't walked and had that wisdom ahead of time from other people that have done it to not do it. So it's given me a new perspective on what it means to be navigating on foot, whether you're going somewhere for leisure or for work or other purposes.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about your photograph that's in the show?
Definitely. I happen to, excuse me for kid in the background. I happen to travel for work to different parts of our area, and on a recent flight from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, I looked down and I realized that I could actually see the border of the city by the difference in light and the absence of light at the edge of the city. And you can actually kind of, once you've seen the map of the city enough and you start getting oriented, you can actually see without the aid of a map, where is the edge of the city just based on the concentration of light. And it was just, it caught my eye. So I snapped a picture, and without really knowing that it would end up being a fitting image with this theme.
Yeah, thank you so much for submitting it. And when you texted me that image, I was like, that's an amazing image. And yeah, of course, I've spent a lot of time staring at that shape, but you sort of see Cheltenham Avenue jump out at you, and you see Broad and Fifth and these lines of light, and seeing all of a sudden across Cheltenham Avenue, it's more spacious and more dark and really striking. Another person who's got some work in the show and also a walking project of their own I'd love for you to hear about. Ken, would you like to jump in and tell us about the images that you shared and the walks that you have embarked on? One of the cool things about this project has been also just connecting to other people's walking projects. And I'd love to introduce you to Ken Johnston if you can jump in. Cool. So maybe he's not ready right now. I'll link you an article to his project, Our Walk to Freedom, where he's been following. There we are.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, JJ. Really happy to participate in the project. My project in the exhibit, it's one photograph of an area of Philadelphia called Girard Point. It's adjacent to the Navy Yard, and it's a point where freedom seekers from Virginia came ashore to Philadelphia back in the 1860s of some point. And it tells the story that William Still, famed Philadelphia abolitionist, who recorded the stories of many of these freedom seekers coming from the South, escaping slavery in the South and coming to the North. Philadelphia was the threshold. And part of my walk over the last 3 years has been following the footsteps of Harriet Tubman from Cambridge, Maryland to Canada. And so, you know, when I had a chance to sit down and talk with JJ about it, he told me about this exhibit, immediately thought of this one particular image of these freedom seekers coming ashore down by the what we call present day Navy Yard. And so that was my submission. And it's, you know, there were lots of freedom seekers that came through Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the threshold of freedom. And some stayed, but most kept moving northward. And so that's what I wanted to show. You know, that's been my pilgrimage over the last 3 years, following the footsteps of these freedom seekers.
Thank you, Ken. I can't now walk by the Navy Yard without thinking of that image and that bit of history there. One of the things that I really love about this project is that it's a very simple concept where you're just walking around the border of the city. And it's not a history tour, and it's not a geography tour, and it's not a zoning and land use tour, and it's not an environmental tour, and it's not this, that, the other. And yet it's all of these things. Along the way, we learn from our fellow walkers, along the way, we walk from the sites we walk by, and the changes that they're experiencing. And it just keeps on bringing up questions and new experiences every time. So thank you for sharing your work and for the stories. And I just shared a link to Ken's other walks in the chat if anyone's interested. I'd also love to hear from another walker who has work in the show, Graham Brent. Is there anything you want to jump in with about the images you shared and your experience with the walk? Oh, might have lost Graham as well. One of the other things that I loved in seeing the submissions was seeing different interpretations of sites that are so familiar to me through new eyes. Was that Graham jumping on? Yes, are you ready?
Hey, JJ. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm on my phone, and can you see me? I guess not.
Nope, but we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. And
Okay.
yes, everything's a little harder on the phones.
Yeah, sorry about that. So well, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation tonight, because guess where I was just a couple of hours ago? I was down at the Independent Seaport Museum, and I just, you know, that right down where your sign is, and I actually, you know, I'm a bit of a history buff. I'm not a historian, but I was actually trying to locate the site of the Navy Yard when it wasn't where it is now, but where it originally was, which I think I'm right in saying is very close to Gloria Dei Church, right off of, it's at the end of, I think it's Washington Street. but anyway, it's right between the Coast Guard and the Sheet Metal Workers Union in that park that's been created. And I'm sure you've walked down there because it would be the closest spot to the Delaware at that point as you're going around. I haven't done that segment, but yeah, so I thought about you just literally, it was just this afternoon I was down there. And yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said, especially what you just said, JJ. You know, it is all of those things you mentioned, and it's even more than that, right? So it's doing something that we all know how to do, but we're finding, you know, different benefits from having done it. So for me, it's everything you just said, plus the community that comes from bumping into people, just a sort of a random group of people, right? Pretty self-selected, but a random group who just happened to show up on the same day for the same, well, for different reasons probably, but at least the one thing you have in common is that you're all going to walk this, at least some of this 10 miles or whatever the period is. And you're just from, you know, just absolutely all kind of walks of life and different ages. You know, at my age, I tend to skew the demographic a little bit, which, you know, it's just the way it is. And it's just a lot of fun sharing those experiences. You just never know who you're talking to. And especially when you're like we were on that last weekend where we're all bundled up against the cold. It's kind of interesting because when you're, you know, a lot of those trappings of life fall away when you're all bundled up, and so it's almost like wearing, you know, it's like a masked ball in a sense, even though you're not actually masked, but you have this completely honest conversation with whoever you just happen to fall in with. And I just love that. You know, it's not something that I would ever really have an opportunity to do otherwise. And just the fact that we're all on the same stretch for that finite period of time. It's just been a really interesting experience. It's kind of hard to define some of that, but I just know that, you know, part of my story is that, you know, I signed up in September for a segment and immediately signed up for 2 more when I came back. I was so excited, and then was very excited to try and do this February one. But the piece I have in the exhibition is actually of a Superfund site. And I know I think it was on that Elkins Park walk. Is that correct, JJ? I think it was in that area, right?
It's the Clearview landfill down in Eastwick.
Okay. And, you know, it was the first time I'd seen it. It's one of those things that's right on the perimeter. And apparently it's gone through a complete transformation from what it used to look like. And you know, you look at it now, and unless you actually came in at the beginning of that segment and saw the sign saying what it was, you wouldn't really necessarily have any idea of what that was, right? It looks like a park. There's lots of trees being planted. It looks, you know, kind of, you know, serene and very verdant. And the idea that this has a history, a very immediate, recent history, is sort of fascinating. So it also cautions you not to make assumptions about what you see, because what you're seeing is just a snapshot in time, like right now, but you really don't necessarily have any sense of how it came to be there. And actually, that's kind of what fuels my interest in history, because, you know, understanding where we are now can really only be achieved by knowing how we got there. So, and so I'll just do a little plug for an idea that I've shared with JJ, which was, as he's pointed out, the perimeter of the city is a very odd shape, but it's only been like that since 1854, when the actual city, the original city, merged with the county of Philadelphia, and which was done in 1854. And the idea there was to break down the boundaries between the various sections of the regions outside the city, you know, because fire departments couldn't cross those boundaries and police departments couldn't cross them. So they decided that it was much better for the city's health and efficiency if all of that was amalgamated. So in a sense, the boundary you see now is the resulting boundary from having amalgamated all those other boundaries, which still exist in names like Kensington and Northern Liberties and Fishtown and so on and so forth, but are no longer separate entities. So since in another activity of my interest of mine is Revolutionary War history, 2024 and 2025 is the bicentennial of the final tour of the Marquis or the General de Lafayette, who came back at the request of Congress. And walking the city as it was in 1824 would be, I think, a really interesting exercise. So maybe we'll do something like that in a couple of years.
We might do many more walks. I think that's the thing that is a challenge for me. Is the first year we did it, we're like, oh yes, and we want to walk all the through streets, and we want to walk around all the other cities in the world. And someone suggested walking gerrymandered districts as a political exploration, and there's no lack of amazing walking projects. And yet, as Kristina noted, I've walked the Philadelphia border 11 times now, and some segments more than that, and it keeps on surprising me and revealing rich experiences. And so for me, I'm going to be keeping busy with Philly, but also for me, the goal is facilitating this experience for other people, inviting others into it. So I'll invite all of those of you who are here. I'm going to put in the walk website in the chat one more time. It's walkaroundphiladelphia.com. And I'd say there will be some events between now and the next walk. The next walk will be in September, around September 8th through 24th. Some other ways to plug in between now and then. But I think for our last couple minutes, I'd love to open it up to just Q&A from folks who've been listening so generously. Maybe there's other questions out there, or anyone else who'd like to share some observations on your experience with the exhibit.
Hey, JJ, Mike Wallbacker, how are you? Good to see you. Nature is especially rich at edges because you've got two ecosystems that often meet, like river meets forest, forest meets meadow. It's one of the few pieces of ecology Disney got right when Bambi wakes up in the forest and goes frolicking in the meadow. So they got that piece right. So I'm curious what kind of nature you see on these walks. So I bet you see some extraordinary things.
I mean, everything. And there's two submissions in the exhibit that kind of surprised me. One is the refrigerator sculpture by Matt Whitmer, the dead bird fridge, where he, in creating that installation, is talking about the birds that are killed when nature meets a man-made barrier that is the glass buildings of the Tyler School of Art on Temple University's campus. And there's also the painting by Joanne Woods of some deer encountering a highway, but actually we encounter a lot of death on the perimeter. Like roadkill is something that I find all around the city, and nature being impacted in that way, which is sort of, for me, that's one reminder of our human frailty as mammals, as vulnerable creatures. We were reminded of it during the pandemic, but whenever I walk around the perimeter and encounter life that has ceased to live, that is a striking thing. But also we see life that is resilient, right? We see places where it feels like we're in the woods, but you realize there's rubble and there's rebar and there's iron, and oh, this used to be an industrial landscape, but nature has reclaimed it and it is now a forest. We see, there were some beautiful hawks and foxes and deer this time around. That's pretty normal. You're looking into the streams at the minnows. Such a wide variety of plants. I mean, when we first, and can attest to this, when we first had this idea of walking around the perimeter of the city, we thought we were going to go do this urban exploration. And it turns out actually a lot of the land at the margins is either industrial sites or natural ones. There's the creeks, the water borders. We walk along the Schuylkill, we walk along the creek. Of course, the walk doesn't have a set path, so one experience might be different than others. We did a lot more being close to the riverbank creeks in the Pequessing this year than maybe last year, depending on what the group decides they want to do for their adventure. But there's, we you hear the birds, you see so many things.
That's great, thank you.
Anyone else?
And I just want to do a shout out to thank you for the exhibit, and thank you, Christine, as well. And everybody, you need to see this show. It's just it's an extraordinary, it's eye candy. It's just a pleasure, but thank you all.
Okay, if you guys have any more questions, please enter it in the chat, and I'm sure Christina and JJ will get to them. But if not, I just want to take a moment to thank you, Christina, and thank you, JJ, for such a wonderful segment of Thursday Night Live. We all appreciate it, and thank you so much to all the artists who spoke tonight. Your pieces are beautiful. Yep, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. This is so important to us. And I really just hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was insightful and beautiful. And yes, please come and see the exhibit at the center. And I hope to see some of you, if not all of you, at next week's Thursday Night Live, uncovering bioluminescent fungi. So if you want to unmute for a little bit. Oh, do we have a question?
I have a bit of added thanks. I want to just take the opportunity while I see Jolie's face on the screen to say thank you for bringing in the bird's nest. Because one of the things, Jolie's installation are these 3 beautiful hand-painted walking sticks, which if you didn't get to read the tag and the info alongside them, once they're done being exhibited, a series of these sticks will be installed at different trail points in the Wissahickon. And there's sort of a way for people to pick them up, take them on a walking hike, report back, share some of their experience through their website. But they're this freestanding, beautiful object. And so when we were installing the show, we were like, how do we label this? How do we credit this? We don't know what to do with it. We put a little sticker on the wall, but it wasn't quite the right thing. And then as everyone was flooding in to the exhibit opening, and we had 140 people, it was a little overwhelming. One person came walking in the door holding this bird's nest, and I was like, oh, neat, you have a bird's nest. And cool, you brought a bird's nest to the reception. And then later, I realized there'd been a secret addition to the exhibition where the bird's nest with a little info tag had been planted on the log that holds the 3 walking sticks. And I love that you took the initiative to come and like add to what we had set up and solve the one problem we couldn't solve. So thank you for bringing that. It was like the perfect little cherry on top of the cake for the exhibit that I thought was pretty well put together, but it needed just that. So thank you for completing it, Jolie.
Thank you. The putting together was amazing, and I wanted to thank you and Christina for, as I said in the chat, for just uniting the community. You know, I think a well-known comedian the other night talked about the fact that Ukraine is a little more united than the United States, but I disagree in our little section here. You did an amazing job. Unfortunately, I remained free of COVID all throughout, but I got it this last month. So I'm looking forward very much to participating in the walks in September. And thanks for letting me be a part of it. And thank you, Schuylkill Center.
Yeah, I wish you good healing and recovery from the COVIDs. Congratulations on making it that long. I will say that I am grateful for bringing community together. And I also want to note, when we say the community, it's a tricky thing, right? Because community is big and community is complex. And when I do these projects, I stop and I look around and I think, who also is not here, right? Like I look, Christina referenced that mural at the parking garages at the airport. And when I put that together, it was a lot of work, but there were people from every zip code in the city, every age, every race, social and partner dancers and this, that, the other. And like, it's a real joy of sort of common humanity, but also diversity. And I know when I look at the walkers that participate in my walk, it's like, oh, we're not a representative sample of the city. This is a much wider crowd. There are barriers to access. There are people who are maybe not getting this invitation or who have reasons why they might not be able to do this thing that we are doing. So that's my one hope of these projects also, that as we continue to develop them, as the Schuylkill Center, which is a hard place to get to for some people, the walk is a hard thing for some people to do, as we continue to develop these projects, that we might build a world where everyone can participate in these experiences that we're sharing now.
JJ, real quick, because you just mentioned it, I talked yesterday with a woman that I know from Disability Pride who got a grant to do circuit trail events for people with disabilities. So you might be seeing some folks from Disability Pride on, yes, Vicki Landers it is. And you might be seeing her, I think, on sometime in September.
Fantastic.
Or earlier.
You know, the funny thing about, I've had some conversations with her and about the walk, and as I think about disability and accessibility, this is just by way of anecdote of how hard this work is to be inclusive. I think when I think physical accessibility, I think wheelchairs and curb cuts, you know, and I think about like how someone in a wheelchair wouldn't be able to like get up the hill, you know, follow this trail. And then I was talking with someone who was interested in the walk and had alluded to having some sort of disability. And I said, oh, well, that segment that you're available for, the Cheltenham Avenue segment, should be pretty straightforward. It's like all sidewalks and roads and curb cuts galore. And this person said, oh no, with my spinal disability, I need dirt paths. I can't walk on concrete. I was like, oh, so what's accessible for one person is not accessible for another person, and it's just complicated and hard. And so we figure it out the same way we figure out the walk, the same way we figure out everything, just one step at a time.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you for our lovely community here at the Schuylkill Center. Thank you to all the walkers, all the artists. Huge thank you to JJ for leading us through this wonderful discussion. And as we said earlier, please come back and see us on April 1st for the closing reception. We're going to be adding that information to our website soon, but it's going to be wonderful food, art, community. There's going to be some printmaking, some walks led by JJ. It's going to be a really, really wonderful afternoon. So keep an eye on our website for more information on that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Happy walking.
Thank you.